The third item on our agenda is an application for site plan to construct 2 fast food restaurants, each with drive-through and parking, and the construction of a 2-story apartment building in the HC Highway Commercial Zoning District. I'm going to ask the applicant, if you would, please come forward, state your name, company you're with, to present the project.
Good evening. My name is Brett Steenberg. I'm the engineer on behalf of Liberty Restaurants Development. Their proposal for the Grant Avenue redevelopment. We are presenting this as a conceptual plan. I know, upon the departmental review, you're looking for some additional details as far as to complete the site plan application. But we wanted to get it before the board to give you some idea of what we're looking at doing and what the project is all about. The project is located at 135 Grant Avenue, and it's 4.46 acres in total, comprising of 6 tax map parcels. It's zoned, as you stated, in the highway commercial, currently occupied by 3 houses, 4 garages, and a warehouse structure, and 4 curb cuts onto Grant Avenue. It's all the houses and the warehouse in the back are serviced by municipal water and sewer. It's proposed to combine the 6 tax map parcels into 3 parcels through a lot line adjustment. And we did work with the city on moving through with that potential lot line adjustment. Lot 1 being the southerly quick serve restaurant lot is 0.69 acres. Lot 2 being the northerly adjacent to Dunkin' Donuts quick serve restaurant parcel is 0.62 acres, and then 3.12 acres remaining on the rear of the lot, abutting the apartments to the west of the site. It's proposed for right now basically the driving use right now is a Popeye's fast food restaurant to be located on the southerly parcel. As you can see, we do have a front elevation of what the new Popeye's restaurants look like. The southerly parcel being 0.69 acres in size. We're proposing 17 parking spaces. There's only 24 seats in the restaurant, so that's more than sufficient for the patrons to the restaurant. They do a lot of drive-through business. They do require a double drive-through kiosk with a single pickup window as part of their standard prototype. It's the primary business these days have been drive-through. This parcel, although it doesn't appear quite as like it has the necessary 20% green space, it actually has 31% of the parcel's green space, and it shows up a little better on the colored rendering we have on the easel here. So we do meet the zoning requirements there as far as green space. The second parcel, again, we're looking at hopefully a quick serve restaurant. We don't have any potential tenants at this time, but a similar design except with a single drive-through due to spatial restraints, 16 parking spaces, and again, that one actually has 38% green space. So that meets the highway commercial zoning requirements. As far as building heights, you're probably looking at 12 to 15 feet. So again, we would meet that design. We're proposing, as far as access off of Grant Avenue, we're proposing one main access, which would service both of the out parcels or quick service restaurants, as well as the rear portion of the parcel. We did show an egress only on the Popeyes parcel. I anticipate that through the permits with DOT, because we will need a DOT permit because we're closing down 2 access points and creating or closing down basically 4 of them and then creating 2 new ones. I anticipate that's going to be a right only given the traffic issues on Grant Avenue. So we don't have any issue with that. We just think it'd be beneficial if vehicles exiting that drive-through can make a right to head back into the city. As far as the rear portion of the parcel, this is something that's been somewhat fluid for a couple of reasons. One, and one of the recommendations from the planning, or the committee that we received, was that we try to obtain access to Standard Avenue. And we're currently in talks with the residents of the neighboring parcel where we would need to get access. We're actually out of the country. We weren't able to get in touch with them. We weren't sure if it was ever going to happen, but we are in talks with them now. We don't know exactly what, but it's in the infancy of the discussions. So we did look at a couple of different options with regard to what we're going to be doing on the rear portion of the parcel. What you have before you is a two-story apartment building. Looking at the neighboring apartment building, I think we probably would almost want to go 3 stories if we did. Maybe make it a little more linear. This is just a conceptual layout, and probably increase it to 50 spaces. But the other thing, in researching the area, and something that, looking at the demographics as well as the need in the area, is self-storage, interior climate-controlled self-storage. So we did, you don't have a plan in front of you, but we did lay out one. It's a 26,000 square foot footprint. We'd probably be looking at 3 stories high, but it would all be interior climate-controlled self-storage. And I did bring some images with us today, if you want to pass around, of what these typically look like. They made them look very nice. They're residential in nature to some extent, and with a lot of glass, a lot of glazing, and not like your typical overhead door self-storage that you would normally be used to. And they've become very popular because of the climate control for businesses, as well as individuals for renting. And we think this actually would be an excellent use for the site, as well as allow us a little more flexibility with the traffic patterns, a little less of a generator of use for traffic from the site, because they don't require a lot of parking. You get 1 or 2 people there. On occasion, it's not people going in and out constantly. You also allows us a little more flexibility from grading on the site, because we do have a substantial grade differential, as you're aware, on the site from Grant Avenue, that we're looking at some retaining walls. We're able to, instead of having monster high retaining walls, we may be able to lay that grade down a little bit better and have it fit in there a little bit better. So that's something we're looking at now, and we're presenting it to you here tonight because we would like to hear your input on that as well. And with me here this evening is Kevin Parisi, who's the agent for the developer, and Heidi Kusina, who's a representative of the developer. If you have any specific questions with regards to what we're looking at doing. Yes?
What scale of storage would you be providing with this? Like, would it be tractor trailers in and out of there?
No, it's all personal self-storage, so they're like 10 by 10, 10 by 20, 10 by 30, like residential style, like if you're moving and you had couches you wanted to store, or, so it's all, it's a small freight elevator. There's usually like 6 to 20 car parking. There's no tractor trailer like delivery. It's not a commercial. It's not like a manufacturer and storage type facility. It's residential focused, consumer focused more than anything else.
And I missed the segue. So you're talking about doing this storage facility instead of the residential unit?
Instead of the apartments in the rear, yes.
Okay, so you completely scrapped the residential?
It's not completely scrapped yet, but
You're
based
talking
on
things-
cost studies and looking at the market studies and kind of some site, as we've got further into the engineering, some site restraints with traffic. There's a huge grade challenge there, and some drainage and access. And candidly, there's some studies are coming back really well for self-storage, and the new facilities are much more attractive than what we used to be there, so it seems to fit really well.
I have a question. So up in the corner there is top right. I think that is Dunkin' Donuts. Is that right? Up above, past that line?
Yes, that's Dunkin'.
Correct. So to me, they've always been kind of squished and the cars are backed up and, you know, their egress goes right onto Grand Avenue or, you know, that street and then onto Grand Avenue. I'm just wondering, at the time, was it possible for them to buy a little more land so they're not so squeezed in, so it wouldn't be, it's like almost right up against what you're doing? I mean, it's so close. I mean, what would you even put for a barrier there? I mean, they have a really hard time out this whole space.
I mean, well, currently there's probably a 6 to 8 foot retaining wall right now. I mean, you have major grade changes, so it's,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
one of our
that's-
first thoughts was combine the entire parcel. We've met with the neighbors at the rear who have been very cooperative and excited about the whole project. But the Duncan site poses a particular problem because it doesn't, without completely scraping it and the way the grade goes, it's really challenging to combine it to the site.
Yeah, but
So
you're
it's really-
sitting up higher, and then there they are.
Quite a bit higher.
Right around the corner, you know, and so how is that going to affect them? I think that's.
It shouldn't affect them. We'll be constructing a retaining wall along that northerly side of that parcel to basically, the northerly quick serve restaurant parcel will be above that. We won't be
Yeah, I got you.
affecting their site at all. Their site, they have a retaining wall right along the property line that's 4 to 6 feet tall, depending on where you are.
How far down the ground does it go? I mean, there's water to seep from, I'm just, you know, the weight of what you're gonna be putting on there, I would think that would just seep down in there. So I know what a retaining wall is, but what's underneath the retaining wall that's gonna hold any kind of moisture back?
We can design it adequately that we wouldn't have any issues with.
Is it designed now for that?
Their existing retaining wall?
Correct.
I do not know, but our retaining wall will be.
From the getting in and out,
Yes.
in terms of, I mean, because as Elizabeth is mentioning, you know, that intersection in part because of Duncan and I'm sure because of just the traffic in and off of Seward and Standard there, it's just very congested in general. So with one entry in and out for these two, which I'm sure your clients are hoping to be successful and widely used, the traffic, have you done a traffic study? Do you know like exactly how much additional traffic may come onto the Grant Ave?
It's what quick serve restaurants are almost, they're a very high percentage bypass traffic. So as far as traffic generation in the corridor, it likely won't significantly increase the traffic generation in the corridor. That being said, it will change some of the traffic patterns and movements on the site because we will have vehicles turning in and out. That is one of the reasons with Popeyes that we're proposing that right turn out because that gives you an easy exit for vehicles moving, you know, southbound on Route 5. I am looking at, from a grade standpoint, it's going to be entirely dependent on grade because the grade of Grant does drop off pretty substantially as you head down towards Standard and Dunkin' Donuts, as we discussed. Possibly seeing about a right turn into the northerly parcel, just to alleviate some congestion at that initial intersection. But again, that was one of the reasons that we looked at the potential for shifting gears and looking at the self-storage because that's quite a bit of a less of a generator of traffic, and typically off-peak what would be your quick serve restaurants. You're absolutely correct. We would love for both of these restaurants to be very successful, and but there, you know, we'll have to work with DOT with what we would need to do there from a traffic and intersection standpoint.
From the interior, is there any concern that there would be stacking? Because you're gonna enter into the Popeyes site.
Right.
And then there's going to be the traffic coming around that are gonna be stacked to go through your drive-through.
That's correct.
And you mentioned that, you know, probably due to COVID, we're a little bit more apt to want to drive through versus getting out of the vehicle and going into the restaurant. Is there any concern that your entranceways on both sides are pretty close to where you're kind of hoping traffic will go in and around where they're going to be making their orders?
That's, the one serious advantage to that is the double drive-through that Popeyes have, because they can put twice as many people through that drive-through and get them to the far side of the pickup window. That being said, we have evaluated it from a traffic standpoint. We feel comfortable, given this market, what we would be seeing, you know, as far as a drive-through without backing up that intersection.
What's the number of cars that the two drive-throughs could handle?
At just the Popeyes location?
At the Popeyes location.
About 12 to 14 cars.
In total?
In
So
total,
that
so-
you would be feeding through both drive-through
Correct,
windows?
yes.
Does anybody else have any?
So my thing is, you said degree and stuff, I just have no problem with that egress coming out, because right where Dunkin' Donuts is, you have that light. That light is such a mega hub for every which way. And then you have, you know, you guys coming out this way, and then you have Dunkin' Donuts coming out, not too far from each other. And then the people off on Seward, that street is. So I guess that's just my worry, you know, and I'm sure you've got it taken care of, but I'd love to hear more about it, how, what you
Yeah,
think, and what the Department of Transportation says.
We'll definitely, like I said, we're gonna have to coordinate with DOT on that. We are still investigating the potential for egress onto Sandar as well directly, which would give vehicles the ability to actually exit fast food restaurant if they were heading down Sandar or wanted to come out to the traffic, like go out, take a right, come out to the traffic light.
Because you'd be bypassing, you know, they have people come out of Dunkin' Donuts, you wait for them to come out, then people from Popeyes, they just keep going. And I guess, and it's right at that crunch, at that light, you know, that's all I was just trying to say. So thank you for looking into it.
So you will still be seeking egress on Standard Ave regardless of the residential component?
Yes.
If you don't get it, will you not move forward, or will you not intend to design this space as it's currently designed?
If we don't get it, we'll still be seeking to design the space.
Okay.
Right now, we're moving forward without it because we had the difficulty of getting in touch with the neighbors. And should we be able to come to terms and actually have the ability, obviously we would like to have that exit and egress onto Standard, because I think it would be better for the overall
Are you
design
gonna
here.
exit off from the Groves, the apartment complex, or is it from?
It would go
Dr.
directly out to Standard, adjacent to the optometrist's office.
Okay, so it's from the doctor's office versus
Yes.
the residential, okay.
So are any of these contingent, are any of these plans or elements of your design contingent on DOT approvals?
The whole
Or-
project would be contingent upon DOT approvals,
Okay.
because we would be required to have a curb cut application or Perm 33 commercial for the site, because we are removing, the one thing DOT is gonna look at is we're reducing the number of curb cuts on the site. Currently, there's 4 curb cuts associated with these parcels in a house without a curb cut, which I've been trying to figure out how that happens to operate. But there's 4 curb cuts on the site. We're trying to reduce it to the maximum extent practical and make it actually a better situation than if the houses did become residential again and people started living in them again. Somebody bought the warehouse back there and was doing automotive work or whatever they decided to do back there. I think you could potentially have a much worse situation than what we're proposing. So we're hoping to redevelop this and make it better than what it would have been or what it was when these houses were occupied and the businesses were running.
Okay, so because you have these contingencies, this is mostly a preliminary, like you said, a concept.
We wanted to get your feel on the project. I always like to get before the planning board, hear what your concerns are here, you know, and see, you know, is this something that, you know, you feel comfortable, especially with, all of these are permitted uses under zoning, so they're, you know, it's a matter of, you know, looking at it from a site plan standpoint and how you feel it lays out, and we definitely want to work with the planning board, and we do have engineering to do on the site, we know that. We're just, like I said, late in recent weeks, we actually started investigating the storage because we're finding that that's we believe is a need in the community, especially something like this.
And what's the blue I'm seeing, like it looks like.
That would be a stormwater management area,
Okay.
this large blue area.
Yes.
And that's just schematic right now, but that's the low point of the site. It'll likely be, everything on the site, including O'Reilly's, which is located here, flows down to, actually into there's a swale, a drainage ditch that actually flows down into Standard here. Their stormwater management system, and I again want to confirm this, but I believe it flows and overflows down into this system here. So everything kind of converges down into this point. So we'll need to do some sort of New York State DEC designed stormwater management system that treats both water quality volumes as well as the runoff reduction volumes and the quantity of runoff off the site, so that we're not impeding or overloading the existing storm sewer and Standard Avenue.
And Steve, just from a city perspective with regards to the traffic, like will there be a requirement for a traffic study given the multiple uses of the parcel?
That's yet to be seen, I'll tell you
Okay.
honestly. I think really the geometry of the layout is probably more concerning than necessarily the volume of the traffic. And that's in part because, as you know, heading south on Grant Avenue there, you're up on a higher hill, you're coming over that hill, you've got the light on Standard and Grant Ave there, and then you've got multiple driveways going different directions all through there. So working with DOT, New York State DOT, to really understand exactly what they're going to permit based upon traffic volumes and all the turning movements is really going to be critical for the density of development that the site can really support. One of the reasons that the city recommended pursuing access onto Standard, and again, the applicant as of right now doesn't have that control of the Standard. If they did, we tell them put access there, but they're working through that process to see what's available, because ultimately what that does is it simplifies the number of turning movements that have to happen at that particular intersection, people waiting to make left-hand turns in and things of that nature. And exactly what level of access a DOT is going to permit is yet to be seen. As they further develop the plans, we'll understand, working with DOT, is it a full access? Is it right in, right out? Is it what's gonna be allowed, and what's feasible in that section of Grand Ave?
Steve, what was the fire department's requirement? I can't get to my
The
notes anymore.
fire department, in some of the notes, and I'll go over some of the notes
Okay.
with the board, but the fire department was specifically referencing the development of the rear portion of the parcel and wanted to make sure that there was access around the building back there, because they were showing residential with access in the front. And their concern is the fire vehicular access all the way around the vehicle. There's a requirement that that road be within 150 feet of all exterior points of the building. So I think that's still fluid at this point. I mean, as to how that's going to move forward and what's
That would
actually going to
certainly
move
be
forward.
addressed if we did pursue the apartments. We
Yeah.
would be, I actually was looking at some different footprints that would allow us a little bit better access around the building
Mhm.
for that reason. And actually on the self-storage, you notice we did add in 20-foot fire road to meet
Mhm.
meet the building code standards for that as well around the building.
Right. Any other?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
So I'm very pleased if the climate controlled storage units are really needed in Auburn, so it's great. So which one? However, I have a question. So this looks more like a hotel. It's really cool. I just want to say I've storage units all my life, so I'm just saying this is more than one. So what is your second floor? What could it be used for? Because I see there's like police or lease or something in the sign. So is it totally just for storage, or is it going to something else be on top of that?
So it's all storage, it's just stacked storage, it's
So
just,
stacked storage. Well, I
that's all
assume it's
cosmetic
also-
and for lighting, but it's basically wrapped interior storage with a freight elevator, so you come in And
So
they're
you
just
have
basically three
choice of
cement,
upstairs.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
just what's
never mind.
available when
That's
you're
why I was
renting.
asking. Thank you.
Yeah, it's all the same use. They're different size depending on what the market's calling for and what the needs are, but it's the same,
I didn't know
it's
you had a
similar to
second
what's.
floor, that's all.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
And if I could real quick to just address one thing you brought up earlier on the access to the rear. One of the things that's important for us to move forward is we don't know if we'll be able to get access, right? Because we don't have land control. So we as in Popeyes and the developer are comfortable moving forward. I always call it worst case, right? That we can't get it. We've done our internal studies, which are pretty strict with corporate standards and with our partners. So that's why it's important to get your feedback, because if in the event we can't, and DOT says, hey, we're okay with, that we think this is safe enough and we can come to an agreement, we obviously want to make sure we have everyone's support, because that's important to us, because we've had some great feedback in conversations with our, I guess we'll say, southerly neighbor. So we're pretty confident we're going to work something out, but we just don't know, and there's a lot that has to happen to do that. So we're comfortable as the development group to move forward either way. Obviously, we want to make the safest and best access site we can, but we think it does work either way. But obviously, it becomes a much, if we could tie, interconnectivity is great for everybody, we believe, but not every neighbor always believes that. So some of it's outside of our control.
No, I mean, I think conceptually, we haven't gotten to the publicly heard part of it, and I know there are folks here that are gonna speak to it, but I would say, design is gonna be certainly really important to us as well, so we're gonna wanna make sure that it is aesthetically attractive for Grand Ave. I mean, we've been doing that with all the other proposals that have come forward. I mean, I've been on the board now long enough for the gas station and other projects. Personally, the traffic on the street is really concerning to me, knowing that, I mean, I have to go in and out of various places. I know Muldoon's is here, we're, frequent customers, so making sure that we can get in and out of current, existing, and then, of course, making sure it meets design, but we'll be curious to hear what our public has got to say as well, and as you continue to flesh out at the project. I mean, Grand Ave this is what Grand Ave is for, so I mean,
Right.
I don't think we're naive to think that we can't also dictate what kind of businesses per se. If Popeyes is interested, that's great that they want to invest in Auburn, but I think we need to make sure we hear from folks and make sure the city is comfortable with the design and how the traffic can get around Grand Ave, so we're not causing more headaches, because that's not good for business in general.
And I think ultimately for the board, being on New York State Route 5, the board has not deferred its decision-making ability to New York State DOT, but relies very heavily on New York State DOT analysis and response to requests for curb cuts and all that other stuff along any of our state routes. So we will be working with New York State DOT to find out what their concerns are and what their approach ultimately is to it. My experience is your biggest hurdle often is satisfying New York State DOT. So I don't think we would say that you can't develop this unless you have access, but having access makes development far more feasible on this site, given the amount of constraints and concerns that are along Grand Ave right in this area in terms of traffic volume and turning movements.
All right, so let's get to the public comment section. So we'll open up the public commenting section of the meeting now. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so Brett was, I'm sorry, what was your name? Gretchen. Oh, Gretchen was asking why we chose to lay out a second drive-through restaurant versus some other type use. And candidly, the synergies together, to Brett's point earlier, they usually do a lot of cross-shopping and cross-traffic. We don't have a tenant until there's nothing particularly ready to go, so It's one of those situations where you kind of try to figure out what will make the best and highest and best use, but we don't really know. I mean, it could end up being something else like O'Reilly's, or it could be something like a Dunkin' Donuts. There's just, you know, we're trying to plan with what we think is the most likelihood. We've had some conversations with some tenants that are looking up and down Grant Ave. Like you said, it is kind of where businesses, I mean, there's pluses and minuses to traffic, right? Traffic brings more traffic. People, that's where retailers want to be and restaurants want to be, and so that's kind of where the mindset, but there's no exact answer.
And one of the other thing too with looking at this as a quick serve restaurant, this is kind of an overall master plan, and we're looking at it. We don't know who's going there, but we're trying to look at it from a worst case scenario, from a seeker standpoint, which, as we're all talking about traffic, would likely be the worst case scenario. This would be one of the more intense generators that would be permitted under the zone from a traffic standpoint. So looking at it from this standpoint, if it ended up getting scaled back to, say, a small retail shop of some sort, it would likely have less of a traffic impact, and we would be well within the thresholds that we're looking at it from a seeker standpoint.
All right, so for the public comments section, anybody wishing to speak should step to one of the podiums here. If you could state your name and address for the record, and keep your comments to the Grant Ave proposal. Are there any people willing to speak, interested in speaking?
Oh, come on.
If not, we can close the public commenting section and move on to staff comments.
So within your packets, the staff did include the initial DRC comments associated with the proposal that we transmitted to the applicant. And just to highlight some of those items, as was noted, essentially we're looking at a concept this evening. As we move forward, we're going to need a full set of design development plans. And along those lines actually is this idea of phasing, understanding that there's a likeliness of moving forward the Popeyes portion of this quicker than potentially having all the other pieces figured out. What the board has done in the past has looked at and reviewed the entire site from an environmental impact of, okay, these are the big concerns, and we're going to address stormwater, we're going to address traffic, we're going to address lighting, things of that nature, and being able to conclude that environmental review portion of it, and then looking more at a potentially a phased approval. Unless all the engineering is done for the entire project up front, it makes it difficult to issue approval for the entire thing. What the board has done in the past is essentially provided a preliminary approval, kind of saying, we agree with the overall layout, we like the look of it, the approach that you're taking to it, but we're going to issue final approval specific to this one parcel. So as we go through this review process, staff will continue to work with the applicant to figure out how all those pieces come together. If it can all be done at once, wonderful for everyone gets their approval, everyone moves on. If not, we typically, for a larger scale development of this nature, we'll look at it in phases after we do an initial look at environmental impacts for the whole development parcel. It was also mentioned that New York State DOT is a agency with reviewing authority for all the work within the right-of-way, the curb cuts along Grand Ave, so we'll continue to work with New York State DOT. The secondary access was discussed. The comments regarding what happens on that rear portion is still very fluid. AFD is just concerned that being removed from Grand Ave, they want to make sure that they can get into that area and circulate around whatever building that is there appropriately. And again, stuff that we'll continue to look at. And maximum coverage, he actually mentioned that based upon the current layout, it's at 31% green space for the Popeyes. We'll be looking at all those items going forward. And the other note is O'Reilly's does exist there. It was pointed out just to the south there. Their stormwater area continued a previous situation where their outlet actually is very much at the edge of this property, which does create a wet area of the site, which will have to be reviewed and ensured that when the stormwater management is developed for that site as a whole, all that's taken into account and the stormwater is managed on site. So really at this point where we're still at is very early on in the process. We'll continue to develop plans. We'll bring them back to the board as we move forward with additional detail and comments. I do want to note for the record that, and this was passed out to the board members this evening, we did receive written comments from Dominic Gambini, and those were outlined for the board. I know that my board members have taken a look at this evening. This will be part of the public to be heard, public record, in the minutes for next meeting as well, so that'll be available to everyone. Generally speaking, he does note several concerns with the development and the impact to the site. Development requires removing trees and forested areas. Does note the concern with respect to fast food chains. I will go on to say that the uses of the site are dictated or are controlled by our zoning code, not necessarily as to we like a use or we don't like a use. We're looking back to what's allowed on the site. He does note actually in here that the one side that he does like of it is the potential for residential property, which again, this is in flux at this point, so we'll see where that goes forward, how that goes forward, and continues on to concerns with the Dunkin' Donuts and things of that nature that are in that area. If the board has questions for me at this point, I'll be happy to address those. But what I'm recommending is that the board table the application that it has before it. Staff will continue to work with the developer on the proposal moving forward and come back with a more defined scope and proposal for the board's consideration.
So Steve, I just wanted, does this go to the public too?
These comments will be included within the minutes of the meeting, so they are available to the public in their entirety. Yes. Yeah.
Steve, my only question, and I think I know the answer, but it's more of like planting a seed kind of thing. Is there any kind of grant funding to make up the difference? Like, you know, if you're just using regular asphalt to pave a parking lot as opposed to the kind that is it called porous? The kind that collects water.
Paving.
What is it called?
Permeable paving.
Yeah. So is there any like funding out there to cover the difference in that? Because it's good for everybody. It's good for the city. It's good for, you know, people who drive and, you know.
Are you referring to going around the back part of the building or just in general?
Just kind of in general, I guess.
Because in general, there's porous pavement, but in terms of like having to go around the building, whether it's the storage or the fire department, you could have grass pavers, right? So you have the grass in between it, and fire trucks can go on it. Nobody else is going to be on it, so it'll be grass.
So that's another option you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And porous pavement is now relatively as affordable.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
So there's not necessarily a funding source available for it, but when looking at the overall design and development approach, if they start to impede on the amount of impervious surface, there's other options of that nature that they can also consider. If there's areas that are more likely to run off onto a neighboring property and cause impacts to a neighboring property, sometimes the porous pavement is considered in those areas to minimize that potential impact on the neighboring properties.
So it's more of a consideration, not part of any kind of specs for, and I understand why.
Yeah, ultimately, unless they start to expand, losing the green space that they have to reuse the porous pavement to offset the green space loss, that's when it becomes more than just a consideration, but a requirement. I would much rather preserve the green space as a whole than to use a different type of paving material
Okay.
to offset that. Though.
Right, sure.
Any other discussion from the board? So is there a motion to table the application? Made by Teresa, second by Jenna. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and comments this evening, and expect us back shortly with a little bit more, refined plans with what we're looking at doing. We'll also be reaching out to DOT to start that process, and hopefully meet with the regional engineer and get some dialogue with them regarding the curb cuts. Thank you.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.